Good evening, everyone. We're delighted to see you in the wholeness of cosmic grace, which enfolds you all with its light and love. This evening, we have a lecture entitled, "Nothing Can Be Lost But Opportunity. How long, O Lord?" It is our earnest desire, then, to humbly create in the consciousness of all a sense of the universal propitiation for our errors, which we have all made either willingly or unwillingly, and thus create a humble spirit of understanding that we may recognize fully the meaning behind the cry that rises from countless hearts the world around, "How long, O Lord?" We who dwell in the time constant should understand that, albeit it may appear a dream or an illusion, the time constant is that in which we live in consciousness now. We live in awareness of time and space. Whether it's an illusion or not does not matter. The best way that I can think of is to use the illustration that is familiar to some of you and not to others. That when you are in a dream, and in this dream you smash your head upon a rock, that it hurts, and you feel that harm, that hurt. Then you open your eyes, and morning is here. The sun is coming up, the lilacs are in bloom, the birds are singing, and the hope of a new day appears. Forgotten then are the illusions of the past night, when the dream in which you broke your head existed. And there is no more pain. There may be a lingering apprehension, similar to Friday the 13th, a little superstition that you may feel. But bear in mind that that has little meaning, because now you see the reality of yourself. Life is fresh. Life is hopeful. There is no more pain of the dream, of the illusion. In God, this transpires constantly. This awakening from the dream. And when we awaken in God, we may regard, and rightfully so, that many of the circumstances that occur to us in time and space are illusions, because they do not reflect the dignity and intent of the cosmic Creator, in whose image we were made. So then, we who are in physical embodiment now in 1972 peer backward and see the many historical epochs in which God has obviously been flaunted. Right while God has been flaunted, the world has been visited with its Saint Therese. It has been visited with its Saint Francis. It has been visited, even in our time, by the magnificent Father Pia in Rome. This man, embodied in the Roman Catholic Church, attained a sainthood while living, and marvelous powers of control over his own life as given to him by God. The perfume of the consciousness of the saints that have emerged in our civilization, and its spirals and patterns of negation are unbelievable. And the perfume of their souls has no doubt mitigated much of the karmic punishment which would have been evoked upon mankind by the karmic lords, but has been withheld in part because of the great devotion of those individuals who have had this magnificent love for God and their fellow men. Let us be grateful to God forever for these souls, identifying with no specific church, even while identifying with one in the sense that they were born in some church, they grew up in it, and they achieved their sainthood in that church, yet they were not of that church alone, but of the universal mind and consciousness of God. These individuals, then, exist in our world today. They are often unsung heroes. No one, perhaps, recognizes them. But they are the fruit of the divine loom. They are woven in heaven. Their thoughts are heavenly. And they do not engage their energies in the rat race of humanity's present and past struggles. Let us be glad that they existed and do exist and continue to exist. Because with Christ they can cry, "How long, O Lord? How long will you, the eternal Spirit, who is conveying to man the best possible gifts, and the release of your sons of glory from higher realms to descend here, to be made mincemeat of by the churlish children of darkness, how long will God allow the sacrifices to go on? How long will He permit the activities of the sons and daughters of Sodom and Gomorrah to continue to do harms to those gracious individuals whose every thought is preparing for the kingdom of heaven, of preparing the kingdom of heaven for mankind?" Yes, I will not say one word against the principle of yoga, because yoga means you and God. But unfortunately, many do not understand it. And the Himalayan hills are filled with the rising of countless mantras, rituals, and experimentations of God-seekers, without necessarily bringing forth a magnificent Christ, or without necessarily bringing forth a Gautama, or one who would take upon himself the iniquities of men. Most of those individuals engaging in yogic practices do so entirely for themselves, that they be emancipated. A perfectly noble idea, and one which we can find no fault with. But oftentimes the involvement of all of this is purely in the domain of self-deliverance, without so much as hardly an iota of consideration of raising the consciousness of others. Saint Germain was different as a Western master. Saint Germain is different. He was involved in countless episodes throughout his many embodiments. And in all of these episodes, the glorious aspect of divine freedom and of freedom for man was raised. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, Christ said, "So shall I, if I be lifted up, draw all men unto me." This Saint Germain did. We visited the Coptic house in Egypt, to which Joseph, Mary, and Jesus fled. We stood in that small, hollowed-out room at the base of this church, stood in the stone chamber where they were for many, many months in Egypt. So we know that Saint Germain, who was embodied as Joseph, the father protector image of Jesus, was then interested in the freedom of that Jesus to express his mission before the contemporary men of his own age. This he did most magnificently, teaching the doctors in the temple and passing through the various stations of experience which were often crucifying to his soul. And he did this as a gesture of his tremendous love for all humanity. Not that he be thought wise, not that he be thought glorious, but that the truth and reality of the blazing fire of the diamond shining mind of God and the consciousness of God could come to all men. That we would all be able to think as he thought, to feel as he felt, and to be as he was. We cry, "How long, O Lord?" We ask how long this agony will last. And we hear the words of even historical men crying out, "This too shall pass." When we lie upon a bed of human pain, and the marvelous physical body system begins to react to conditions of inharmony that begin to manifest in the force field of our individual self, many times we are almost frightened at the awful pressures and the confluence of those pressures impinged upon our nervous system. Let us be aware of one thing and be aware of it firmly. God has not ordained pain. Pain results from inharmony. And when it is produced as a signal to protect the body temple against various problems, including the problem of death itself and the cessation of life in our physical form. Were it not for pain and the threshold of human pain, people would often continue various courses of conduct which would mean their early demise. And so pain is protective. It doesn't seem, however, to the person engaged in the seeming brutality of pain that we can even fathom any protective sense or presence in pain, owing to the fact that at a time when we are in pain and distress, life is not very pleasant. There are various methods whereby even in the most brutal situation of pain, one can learn to rise above pain and enter into the consciousness of God while the body suffers. The stigmata of many people, which of course is the appearance, as in the case of Teresa Naumann of Germany, the appearance of the nail prints in the hand and then the bleeding that issues forth from this, has not only occurred in one instance, but in many cases down through the ages, and probably is the result of some level of sainthood specifically identified with the experiences and last hours of Jesus Christ. To those of us who witness the miracles of stigmata, this seems to us incredible as we behold it or witness it. For only at certain times of the year, usually during the Passion of Christ, when this is celebrated, do these collective influences arise in the individual consciousness of certain devotees and bring about this experience. Now, I'm not advocating that the way to salvation is that you key such responses in yourself, not at all. I simply feel that we should all understand that these are far more than ordinary circumstances, that these are extraordinary circumstances, and they indicate a part of the great mysteries of God that exist upon this planet. I am convinced, as I recall with a sense of great soul delight, my visit to the Coptic Church, where Mary, the mother of Jesus, appeared this very year and was seen by many, many people. We talked with a young lady, that is Mrs. Prophet talked with her, who had seen Mary, who had witnessed this experience. And I am not certainly, after I seen the light in the young lady's eyes and the spiritual experience of that young lady, going to say it did not happen. She told of being a very worldly person, of complete involvement in those aspects of human nonsense that sometimes come about in either courtship or associations with the opposite sex. She told of being involved in all kinds of worldly thoughts and said that her whole mind was concerned with just having fun and being a happy person according to the standards or misstandards of the world. Then she said she saw Mary, and the magnetism of Mary, the radiation of Mary, just completely flooded the chalice of her physical heart as well as her spiritual heart. She said that it just melted away desire from her for worldly experience and kindled a great cup of joy within her consciousness. And she said she could not forget the experience and the awareness that she had of the other side of the fence, of the other side of life in which we have probably spent just as much time as in this side here, is now more real to her than this side. You understand? And so she is living a spiritual life and a life of dedication. We heard the Coptic priests in their great chants, and we heard as though it was one multitude of voices blended into one, the tremendous devotion of the people. And now I can understand why Mary, the mother of Jesus, would appear in Cairo, Egypt. You understand? I can understand it because I saw devotion rising as seldom expressed elsewhere. And it reminded me of some of our ultra-advanced meetings when the masters, in their specific conclaves with us, to some of us, literally stepped through the veil, although not in the manner that most people would imagine. In other words, we do make contact with them. And the devotion and the praise and the contact with them is such that it is almost total, because one is totally involved in it at that specific moment. I admit, and who can deny it, that the passions of the world, the urges of the world, the spirit of the world, which is enmity with God, quite naturally takes over the consciousness to some degree as we return to the bitterness of the cup of Mara, which is shed abroad in the world where fun-seeking becomes the entire destiny of many people, without the realization that they can have more fun, more delight, more happiness, more joy, more wonder, more mystery, and more unravelment of mystery in God than they ever could find in the world with all of its sophistication and phoniness. Because I don't mind telling you that in my work with K-17 and the Ascended Masters, even before we were in this activity, before it had ever been created, I was made aware of the depravity of mankind, not only in low places, but in high places. In other words, in the church, in the political capitals, in the political arenas of the world, and out among the teaching profession, and in the ordinary housewife's domain. Several months ago or years ago, there was released a motion picture called The Diary of a Mad Housewife. And it epitomized to me, just the title alone, the fact that people become caught up in madness, absolute madness, that it is difficult to believe. And it is similar to the madness of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you do not believe that Sodom and Gomorrah happened, if you don't think that nature and nature's God has rebelled in numerous past ages, why then look at some of the historical facts. They came to life for us in our recent journey to the Holy Land, when we drove along the Dead Sea, 1,600 feet below sea level. We were made to realize that in that site where Sodom and Gomorrah stood, now buried beneath the Dead Sea, for Mrs. Prophet was able to confirm that without the knowledge that it has already been scientifically confirmed. And when we stood at Qumran, the site of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we were able to recognize and touch that point in history which confirms the facts of the living God. Do you know that several years ago that the Ark of Noah, the Noachian Ark, was found high upon Mount Ararat by a Russian aviator? Do you know that pieces of that ark were taken to Los Angeles, California, where they were tested atomically for age and found to coincide with those dates? Do you know that many of the things concerning the ancient records have already been confirmed scientifically? Why are these things suppressed in the main and merely made the object of display upon the showcases of some of our bizarre magazines, where they appear as half-truths, simply because no one has the courage to print these refutations of many of the stories that are told by our modern atheists in the colleges and universities? How do they know? How do they know? And do they know? You know why? They haven't been here any longer than you and I. These teachers. Where did they get their information? And how can they, in gazing upon the magnificent patterns of the cosmos revealed in the heavens and the marvelous workings of the human mind, and when they observe the magnificence of God that is far greater than just producing the experiment of taking all the parts of a Swiss watch up into an airplane and throwing them into a paper bag, tightening the mouth of that bag, throwing it down to earth 20,000 feet below, and then when it arrives down at the earth, unbroken, all of the pieces have put themselves together and it's now ticking. Well, this is what has happened to our universe. Out of the rock and the strata of the rock, the innate intelligence of God has manifested. The innate intelligence of God has put together our earth that wobbles through its pathway in space and does not, as a rule, collide with any other foreign body upon that self-same path in space through the millions of years and aeons that this solar system, according to cosmic law, has existed. How marvelous it is! And yet we see the creation of modern man in our century. We see our contemporaries, born of woman, taking their inheritance of architecture, their inheritance of culture, their inheritance of science and the laws of science, and producing a civilization of the dimensions of our modern world here with all of its chaos and confusion upon this planet. While we as people walk around amidst all this confusion of thoughts and facts and fancies and fallacies, we look at it all and we say, what is real? But they keep us so busy. Isn't this terrible? They keep us so busy that we do not have time to even reason. Understand this. We don't even have time to reason the fact that God is. I contend with absolute certainty, for the Master told me, that the present dilemma of wheat in the Soviet Union is the result of the fact that the Russian people have denied God. Not all, for there are many magnificent people living in Russia who are born in Russia. There are cultured people, there are people who preserve the image of God as a sacred icon upon the walls of their consciousness. They will never give up their conception of God. They hold to the dignity of God with a fervor that defies the imagination. These people live there. Do you remember, some of you, the magnificent dictation of the unknown master, Igor? Some of you were touched by that. Those who were here, all of you were touched, and who could help be touched by it? It was one of the most magnificent dictations I have ever heard, and the feeling that he conveyed was out of this world. I suggest that all of you avail yourself of the opportunity sometime of hearing the dictation of the unknown master, Igor. The little Russian boy, he grew up in Siberia under the most frigid conditions, in poverty, and was exposed to the ordinary Christian concepts, and he told of how he was visited by angels as a child, and these angels conveyed vast storehouses of knowledge to him. And he told how his consciousness expanded like a cosmic balloon, and how he went out into space in consciousness and made contact with all of the events that were transpiring all over the world. And his devotion into the Godhead was such that he attained his mastery at a very early age and proceeded to radiate his love and his help all over the Soviet Union. It was a moving dictation and a great experience for us to hear it several years ago here in Colorado Springs. So let us understand that when we cry out, and our heart cries out, and the heart of humanity cries out, and the young people cry out, "O Lord, how long will conditions exist as they now do? Conditions of depravity similar to Sodom and Gomorrah. Conditions of immorality so fierce that you cannot imagine them." Now, I do not persecute those who have made moral mistakes. This activity, and God himself does not persecute such people. What did he say of Mary Magdalene or Magdalena? What did he say of her, the Christ? He looked at her, he saw all of her sins around her in her aura, and he defended her in this sense. That him that is without sin first cast a stone at her. That was the sense that he had at that moment. Now, it doesn't matter whether it was she at that specific moment that he was writing in the sand, but the point is his same concepts were utilized. And the point I want to make is that Mary Magdalene, the prostitute, the high-class harlot, not just the ordinary little street gal, but the kind of a woman that would be a modern call girl that lived in a great and beautiful apartment and wore the best robes and wouldn't be seen in the bad part of town, that comes out with her beautiful Cadillac and visits someone. You understand what I mean? She was a high-class prostitute. But when she saw Jesus, she didn't want any more of it at all. She knew and she saw all of her iniquities. Jesus said, "He that is last shall be first, and the first shall be last." So none of us ought to stand on the smugness of our concepts and think just because we have been delivered from various aspects of error that we're so much better than anyone else. Not so. For God is interested in everybody stopping the karmic action of negation. He's interested in people coming to the point where they understand that there are higher principles in the universe, and that when these principles are properly used, man, regardless of what errors he has made, can balance those errors and his debts to life and assist the collective forces of light in what may be called the battle between light and darkness, to preserve this world intact against those forces that would destroy it. I have no doubt, and I assure you all, that if those forces that are in the world today continue unabated and in their unbridled manner to decimate the great heritage of culture and spiritual reality, which is our birthright, that we will find that retribution will come not only upon this world as a planetary body, but upon us individually, and great regret shall come to the world, because Babylon will indeed be fallen, the modern Babylon, the Babylon of the Babel of confusion that now exists in the world. I have no doubt of that. But I feel certain that the prayers of the saints and the prayers of our modern mystics today, who have recognized the need to call to God for grace to preserve us all against the erosions that otherwise would actually remove our light from us and cast us into the realm of darkness, where I am sure we would find a great hunger for light. This must be removed. This must be changed. Mankind en masse must come to reality and come to their senses before it is too late. I'm not going to fanatically stand up here and preach against darkness in the world. I don't have to. I don't think there's a person in this room or in the next adjoining rooms that will deny, without question, the happenstances that are occurring in our world. And I am sure that the lamentations of Jeremiah, the prophet, are many times excelled by modern people today. I'm sure they lament the fact that conditions are as they are. For in reality, the world is not so awfully happy about it. and our psychologists and our psychiatrists and our people involved with understanding of what is happening, who try to help these people find some sense out of the muddle of life, these are all aware of the fact that these conditions exist. They talk about it. They try to do something about it. But the one who is doing the most is the collective body of hierarchy, or the great white brotherhood and the masters who are ascended. They are doing more than all mankind put together, because they are working in a practical way with the power of light and the plan of light itself. Now, when we were in Jerusalem recently, we gazed upon those Dead Sea Scrolls, and one of those scrolls had a very important account in it. That account concerned what was called the battle of the forces or sons of light and the sons of darkness. This showed that the Essene community at Qumran was aware of the existence of brothers of the shadow as well as brothers of the light. We have no doubt that these so-called brothers of the shadow will come to the end which they deserve, and that the forces that use them will also come to an end as they are repudiated by embodied humanity. But unless we repudiate them, unless we prepare to exhibit our power as sons of light, we will not be able to assist humanity in this Armageddon of human experience which currently is taking place in the world, preparatory to the full manifestation of the Golden Age. But the Golden Age does not have to manifest. An age of greater darkness could appear instead. There is no guarantee, absolutely, that at the end of 1972, without question, that the Golden Age will appear just like that. Because the potential, how long, O Lord, lies within the domain of humanity, and Mother Mary and all the ascended masters know that. When they speak of its appearance, they are projecting the force field of hope to mankind that perhaps we will generate enough love and enough light and enough integrity and open up our consciousness and our force field to allow the Master's consciousness to descend into the force field of self and work out through us as cleansed vessels unto righteousness those elements of salvation which will be then for the glory of God, not only to the Gentiles but to all nations upon the face of the earth, and to those who are scattered thereon. God would summon out of the earth those who respond to his calling. And the calling of God is the same as it always has been. Come out from among them and be ye a separate people, chosen unto the Lord. This is man's free will. When he chooses to follow God and pursue God all the way, he isn't just going to suddenly start out here in spouting wisdom. He isn't suddenly going to start out spouting power. I think that the hierarchy literally despises that activity where individuals suddenly pull rabbits out of the air, where people are engaged solely in phenomena and the accompanying aspects of phenomena. This is a very, very grave mistake, that people become phenomena hounds, that they want to see some physical manifestation. The multitudes who followed Jesus did not always behold his miracle, because we read in the Scriptures that there was a certain city that Jesus went to, and he could do no great works there whatsoever. Ask yourself why. The answer is in the Scriptures, of course. It says, because he could not find any faith there. And doubt is one of the most corrosive and diabolical forces in the universe, because it removes clear seeing from the soul. All the evidences that would produce faith may be there, but as long as we allow ourselves to be charged with doubt, we are a diode of negative manifestation. I want to explain what I mean by that in a little more detail so that you'll all be able to grasp it more fully. What we call an electrical charge is used throughout the cosmos. It's used in producing the phenomena of lightning. We have the positively charged manifestations of the earth, and we have the negatively charged cloud, and we produce lightning. A man and woman are like this too. Sometimes the man is positively charged and the woman is negatively charged because she's the lesser vessel, and that's what it means. Her charge is a little bit less, you see, and just the difference or drop in potential produces the lightning of love at first sight. And what an illusion that can be sometimes, because as soon as that charge has dissipated itself and they have come to a balance, their polarities no longer affinitize, and so all is lost. Now, all doesn't have to be lost at all in life. You don't have to lose anything, because the only thing you can lose is your opportunity. Your opportunity to move toward perfection. Your opportunity to have impinged upon you divine grace and rise upon the ladder of life. You know, long ago Jacob fell asleep, and while he slept, he had a sublime dream. And this has been painted by Gustave Doré as well as others. Those of you who have gazed upon this famous picture will recall how very touching and real it is to the soul, because you see him laying there asleep with his head upon a stone as a pillow, and then the dream is actually taking place in lineal form, and you see these angels ascending as upon a ladder up into heaven. And what this means is that we all have different levels of achievement, of attainment, of our relationship to divine reality. And we may be now upon a lower rung of the ladder of the consciousness of Jacob, of Christ, of God. It doesn't make any difference. We may be at a lower rung. Someone else may be 3 or 4 rungs above us. Sure, sometimes they may act, unfortunately, as though they were clear all the way up where it's safe. But they may fall. The consciousness of man may fall and fail, even after he has apprehended many divine things. We have no guarantee that it will succeed, except the guarantee of humility and grace. God resisteth the proud, and he giveth grace unto the humble. If you want to be counted with the elect of God, if you want to make it, if you really want God to lift you up, keep humble. I urge this upon you as an absolute certainty. Without humility, there are often too many episodes that are created by situations where people will come along and we want to show off how important we are. So we strut around like peacocks, and our mind takes delight in some exhibitionism. And right away, boom, down falls Humpty Dumpty. Who can put Humpty Dumpty back together again? It's a bit of a hard task, isn't it? When you once fall through pride, because pride is what caused Lucifer to fall from his position in the angelic hierarchy. Do you realize that? Pride is what caused him to fall. And so if we would stand fast, we must not allow ourselves to be dragged through the mire of human pride. Now, if it happens to you sometime that you have a little flicker of pride that rises up, and before you can even control it, that pride starts to act in your world, do not be so terribly distressed that you literally fall on your face. It's the same with anything. Just recognize it very gently and say, well, I guess you don't belong here. You know, Jesus, he used to say, get thee behind me, Satan. Now, if there was no Satan, if there was no evil, if there was no possibility of his being influenced by this, and I say there was, when he was taken to the pinnacle of the temple, and he was told, look, see all the kingdoms of this world. There's Moscow over there. Of course, it wasn't probably there at that time, but I mean, this is a general idea. If it happened today, there's Berlin, there's London, there's Paris. All the gay lights are blazing there, and you can be the king of all things that you can survey with the consciousness of your mind in your mind's eye view, why, you can rule everything. What did he say? Get thee behind me, Satan. He wouldn't buy it at all. And he came into Jerusalem riding upon a colt, the foal of an ass. Can you get any lower than that? We saw them all over the Holy Land, Arabs and Jews alike, riding these lowly colts. And they didn't look so very important. But you know, when the hosannas and Palm Sunday comes to mind, we today ride in consciousness on the glory of this Jesus. But in his day, he was an outcast, a rebel, a rabble-rouser, an anarchist, and everything that goes with it. He wasn't liked at all. Oh yes, he had people following him. Some of his best friends forsook him. Some of his own disciples repudiated him. He was cast down, but he was not destroyed. And in the face of all this, and I was actually inside the prison that Jesus was in. You know how big it was? About a quarter the size of this room. And it had a hole in the ceiling. And they put a rope under his armpits and lowered him down in there. And when he was in there, that place was filled with slime and mud. There wasn't a nice solid floor like there is today. It wasn't all whitewashed like it is today. It was a dark, damp, and dismal dungeon. And he could see, perhaps up through that dungeon, the Roman fires in the fireplaces, but he couldn't feel the heat. He was in a damp, dark, and dank, dismal dungeon. And there was a little hole up above where the Roman centurion or one of the guards could open that little window and look down on him down in that miserable hole. Fortunately, he wasn't there long. But nevertheless, when I stood there, I could feel intimately the records of that episode. And there were other prisoners that were there too. But to think of the indignity of that place gives me a strong feeling even now of understanding the reality of his experiences. Somehow or other, most of the time you read about these experiences and they seem very remote to you. It is almost as if the Passover week and all that experience was something that was more or less fictional. You begin to wonder, is it real? Even good Christians sometimes in their own minds, when they're separated from others, may at times, I don't say they have to, but they may at times wonder whether this is reality. But then when you're there, in this land where everything, even nature, is covered with a sort of a yellow rock dust, when you actually see that land, and when you enter those places where he was a prisoner, where he was tried, where he carried his cross, and the hill of Golgotha and the sepulchre, somehow or other, the proximity to those holy places, made holy, of course, by his presence and the presence of many, many pilgrims and devotees that have come from all nations of the world, becomes a real thing to you. And so you begin to ask yourselves, to what purpose have the lives of all the saints really been put? Is it just to deliver themselves, or is it to deliver humanity en masse? And I say it is to deliver the earth. This is what I feel, and this is what I believe. I believe that the earth is intended to be the Lord's and the fullness thereof. I believe that every man, woman, and child is intended to partake of the sacred Eucharist of the broken body of God. And by that I mean that the fires of the Holy Spirit are dispensed to us individually. We have the sacred Eucharist in our hearts, whether we realize it or not. Oh, I realize that there may come a sublime moment when it makes itself known to us in a more than ordinary manner. But that is not necessary in order for people to actually have divine experiences. We cannot classify experiences of ourselves with someone else. People have all kinds of experiences with God because this ladder is a climbing ladder. And we are intended to move up the rungs of that ladder of life. And so today, as we gaze upon the awful despondency of the world and the trial by fire in which so many people are being engaged, For don't think for 1 minute that all their lives are just happy. Don't think for 1 minute that everybody in the world is just having a wonderful time because they're drinking, or they're carousing, or they're well-to-do, or they're poor, whatever the situation. Their festivities often reflect their insecurities. And quite frankly, these insecurities often drive men and women to do things that they never would do if they felt more secure. And so I think the reinforcement of the realities of God as disseminated by our organization, our people, and by the many good and constructive organizations that I believe have been and are upon this earth is a very important part of life. But the question that comes before us is it enough? Because it needs to be enough to counterbalance the weight of human effluvia and darkness. I'm approaching the end of my time. But what I want to impress upon you is that your opportunity now is very, very great and cannot be lost. Nothing that you have needs to be lost. Should you fail to apprehend this opportunity, you will presumably, providing your karmic record is clear, be re-embodied upon this planet at another date and in another place. You will hear other tongues and other conversations, and you will still be required someday to prove yourself. If you fail to make hay while this sun of God shines before you, while the realities of hope are before you, there is no necessary dismal darkness from which you will never be able to extract yourself through all the aeons of creation. I agree with that. But nevertheless, the longer you prolong your dedication to God, the more difficult it probably will become. And this is a fact. It isn't because heaven is making it so, it's because you are making it so. We make our own difficulties. We create them. I am sure I fall in that category with you all. I am not preaching at you. I am speaking for you because I want you to understand this, because it is truth and living truth. When we get to the point then where we can submit ourselves to the patterns of our divinity, they will begin to unfold. I have seen enough glimpses of reality to be content and to know that the hopes of heaven are so beautiful, so all-engrossing, so magnificent, that one only dares to hope that tomorrow they will be able to make greater contact with this reality than they've ever done before. Oh yes, there's a lot of meditation goes on in the world. There's a lot of prayer. There's a lot of supplication. Do you know what supplication is? It's sort of striving with God, contending as Jacob did with the angel. Supplicating, begging. But you know, you don't really have to do that. This came as a great surprise to me. It isn't necessary to struggle with God, but ask and ye shall receive. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. When you receive from God, the beautiful experiences that will come easily will themselves fulfill the purposes of your life right here and now. Isn't that wonderful when you stop and think about it? Isn't it really wonderful that God responds? Isn't it wonderful that you can be heard? Some people have the idea they can't be heard, but they can and they are heard by the hierarchy. But it's not a matter of just like the Wailing Wall that we witnessed in Jerusalem. We stood there before the Wailing Wall and we watched people praying at the Wailing Wall. I'm sure God hears regardless of how we come, because He accepts us as we are. But the point I want to make is that you don't have to wail. You don't have to lament. You don't have to supplicate. You can simply say, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. You can say, Father, into your hands I commend my life. Take care of me. Take care of Joe over here. Or take care of Mary or Peter or whoever, it doesn't matter. And you don't have to have an elaborate prayer. God hears if that prayer is as simple as a child. And His answer may come in as simple a manner. Or it may come in a profound engram that will literally sweep you off your feet and expose to your mind's gaze a vast reality. Do you see that? All these things can happen. And what is important is that they do happen. How long, O Lord, we say? Well, this is up to us as a race. I believe that the people in this room and the next room could make a vast difference in what would happen to the whole earth, because I don't think that salvation is necessarily compounded by numbers. However, I am sure that when it manifests upon the planet, in its fullness, it will be in a manner that is calculated to reach the numbers and the numberless people of this earth. So let us gaze then upon the potential of the golden age, and let us determine to see that it does become a reality. I believe it is faith that has enabled the ancient prophets and teachers to go through the trials they went through. I believe it is faith that will take us safely through, now and always. I believe that it is a mind that will not give up. I think the greatest weakness of all in people is the idea that they'll say, well, there isn't any hope anymore for me, or I don't have a chance because I'm an underdog. Nobody's an underdog in the eyes of God. We are all His children, His sons, and His beloved. And if we can believe that, we will approach Him with a different idea and a greater power to prevail in prayer. Because the Son does not necessarily pray for, He asks and it manifests. I want to make this distinction then when I speak of the sons of light and the sons of darkness. The sons of darkness always have questioned whether or not they could actually materialize God's will upon this earth. And so they have usually tried to enslave others to their will and try to work with their energy to produce what they wanted. This is totally unnecessary. Instead of functioning that way, we make our minds up here and now that we are going to ask and we shall receive. Through faith, we can change the whole world. And how do you start? You start with yourself. You change yourself. When you change yourself, this will in effect reach out into the world and let the light of God shine wherever you are. Wherever you walk, His light will go and flow. Wherever you are, the truth will also manifest. It's going to come about in the twinkle of your eye. It's going to come about in the smile upon your countenance. It's going to come about because of the smile in your heart. It's going to come about because the love of God will radiate through you. And others will believe because you believe. This is the immediacy of the kingdom of heaven that brings about the end of how long, O Lord? Because there then will be the fulfillment of that which mankind have for millenniums expected but not necessarily received en masse. Oh, they've got snatches of it, and these are the saints of which I first spoke. But now all men can and will come to accept this. Not the cup of mire or the cup of bitterness, but the cup of the water of life which floweth freely in the world. This is the hope of the brotherhood. Let it be your hope as well. And let's not just have it as a dead hope, but a vital, flowing compassion that emanates from the Godhead and flows through our heart onto the heart of the world. Because with us, the hierarchy will stand, and the cement of cosmic love and purpose will be reborn in this world. Thank you. And God bless you.